just another evening in our new house, an old Victorian home that my parents had fallen in love with. It had charm, they said, but I could feel it from the moment we moved in. Something was wrong. My name is Peter, and I was 13 when we moved into the house on the Maple Street. The house was huge with tall windows and creaky floors. I got the attic bedroom, which I initially loved for its privacy and views of the stars. Little did I know it would become my prison. It started with the noises, soft at first like whispers, just at the edge of hearing. I thought it was the wind or the old house settling. But then, late one night, I heard a distinct laugh, a child's laugh, coming from the corner of my room. My heart pounded as I turned on the lamp, but there was nothing there, just shadows dancing on the walls. I tried to tell my parents, but they brushed it off. New houses always take some time getting used to, my dad said. There's nothing to be scared of, my mom added. I wanted to believe them, but the feeling of being watched was becoming unbearable. One night, I woke up to find a little girl standing at the foot of my bed. She was pale with long dark hair covering her face. Her dress was old-fashioned, torn and dirty. I froze, unable to move or scream. She pointed to the corner of the room where the shadows seemed to grow darker and deeper. And then she was gone. The next day, I found some scratches on my arm, as if something had clawed me in my sleep. My parents were starting to worry. They said I was just having bad dreams and it was stress from the move. But I know it was real. The girl was real. Determined to find answers, I began researching the house. I discovered that the family had lived here in the early 90s. They had a daughter, Emily, who died under mysterious circumstances. Her body was never found, and her parents left the house shortly after. Rumors said she haunted the place looking for someone to play with. I told my parents everything. They didn't believe me at first, but when they saw the scratches, the look of terror in my eyes, they started to take it seriously. My dad decided to search the attic for any clues. That's when we found it. A small hidden door behind a loose panel. It led to a tiny room filled with old toys, a child's drawing on the wall, and a diary. The diary belonged to Emily. It detailed how she had been locked in the attic by her parents, who thought she was possessed. She wrote about a shadowy figure that came to her at night, whispering things, making her do terrible things. Her last entry spoke of a plan to escape, but she never did. We moved out of the house the next day. My parents couldn't deny it anymore. Something evil resided in that house. But even after we left, I couldn't escape the feeling that Emily was still with me, watching, waiting. I still wake up sometimes, hearing her laughter, feeling her presence, and I know deep down that the nightmare isn't over. I never believed in ghosts, at least not until that night. It was supposed to be a fun day, a spooky challenge in the old abandoned house at the edge of the town. Everyone in the town had stories about it, but they were just stories, right? Well, I was about to find out. The house loomed before me, its windows dark and empty like a hollow ice. The front door creaked open with a groan, as if it hadn't been touched in years. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my flashlight barely piercing the thick darkness. The air was stale, filled with the scent of mold and decay. I started in the living room. It was surprisingly intact, with dusty furnitures draped in white sheets. I could almost imagine the family that once lived here, gathered around a fireplace. But that was years ago. Now, it was just me and whatever else might be lurking in the shadows. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I moved deeper into the house. Every sound echoed, amplifying the silence. I kept my flashlight steady, trying to ignore the cold chill that seemed to follow me. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, coming from the upstairs. My heart pounded as I climbed the staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. The whispering grew louder, but I couldn't make out the words. At the top of the stairs, I paused, scanning the hallway. There were several doors, all closed except one at the far end. I approached the open door, my pulse racing. The room was a bedroom with an old, ornate bed and a broken mirror hanging on the wall. The whispering stopped abruptly as I entered. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw it. A shadowy figure standing by the window, just a silhouette against the moonlight. I froze. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching me. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I mustered the courage to speak. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. No response, just silence. Then the figure began to move, gliding across the room without a sound. It passed right through the bed, coming closer. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams around the room. Panic surged through me. I backed away, but the figure kept coming. It raised an arm, pointing at the broken mirror. I glanced at it and, to my horror, saw my reflection, except it wasn't me. The reflection was distorted, twisted. I looked back at the figure, but it was gone. Just like that, the room was empty. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the front door, not stopping until I was far away from the house. As I caught my breath, I looked back one last time. The house was silent, dark, and still. I never went back to that house, and I never doubted the stories again. Whatever was in there, it wasn't just a story. It was real, and it was waiting. This happened to me few months ago, and it's an experience I'll never forget. So sit back, turn off the lights, and get ready for a bone-chilling tale from the heart of a dense forest. I needed a break from the city, so I decided to go on a solo camping trip. I found this spot in a dense dark forest, far from any signs of civilization. It seemed perfect for some peace and quiet. The first day was amazing. The air was fresh, the sounds of birds and rustling leaves were calming, and I felt completely at ease. As night fell, I set up my tent, lit a small fire, and settled in for what I hoped would be a relaxing evening. Around the midnight, as I sat by the fire, I started hearing some strange noises. At first, it was just the rustling of leaves and occasional snap of a tree. But then, the noises grew louder and closer. It sounded like footsteps, but heavier, almost like something big was moving through the tree. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was probably just a deer or some other animal. But then I heard a low growl. My heart began to race, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but I couldn't see anything beyond the first few trees. Suddenly, I heard branches snapping much closer this time. My eyes strained to see through the darkness, and that's when I saw it. A shadowy figure moving between the trees. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its movements were unnaturally smooth. The figure stopped, and I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. Deciding it was best to stay in my tent, I zipped it up tightly and tried to calm myself down. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by the sound of something scraping against my tent. It was a slow, deliberate sound, like claws dragging across the fabric. I held my breath, trying not to noise. The scratching continued, and then I heard the growl again. Only this time, it was right outside my tent. I knew I had to do something, but I was paralyzed with fear. I reached for my camping knife, the only weapon I had, and held it close. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. I waited for what felt like an eternity before unzipping the tent just enough to peek outside. The forest was eerily silent, and the fire had died down to embers, and I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but I knew something was out there. Just as I was about to retreat back into the tent, I heard a whisper, a soft chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You shouldn't be here," it said. I spun around, my flashlight flickering, but saw nothing. The whispering continued, coming from all directions, growing louder and more insistent. "Leave now, or you will never leave at all." I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, I packed up my things and got out of there as fast as I could. On my way back, I found strange tracks in the dirt, unlike any animal tracks I'd ever seen. They were large and had a clawed pattern that sent shivers down my spine. To this day, I don't know what was out there in the forest. I haven't been camping since, and I don't think I ever will again. So if you ever decided to go camping in a dense dark forest, be careful. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows.